Welcome to Somerset Stories. I'm Kathy Pickar, a Somerset resident and your host. This program is designed as a series about Somerset and its residents past and present. At its best, we hope to provide a chronicle for its bicentennial in 2106. And we hope to provide a window into small-town democracy where civic engagement and government transparency should have its strongest roots. We're beginning the series with a closer look at those folks who are currently holding elected positions in the town. Specifically, we're beginning with the mayor of the town of Somerset, Jeffery Slavin. Jeffrey's been mayor of Somerset since 2008, and he was on the town council for 6 years prior to that. He's been a member of the Maryland Mayors Association, and also an active board member with the Maryland Municipal League. But perhaps Jeffrey's best known for his philanthropic interests in helping the marginalized people of Montgomery County. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Jeffery Slavin. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Great to be here, Kathy.
Jeffrey, there are few folks in positions of power, either in Montgomery County or the state, for that matter, who do not know your name. And I'm curious, I'd like to know a little bit more about you and what's behind the name. And I wonder what in your background has shaped your philanthropic interests and your obvious love of politics, going back to where you grew up.
Well, as you know, as I think you know, I grew up right near Somerset in Montgomery County. And of course, we're all sort of oriented towards politics in Montgomery County because of the federal government being so close. It's in the news all the time and all that. But really, my personal mission and philosophy comes, of course, from my family, my Jewish roots, tikkun olam, giving back, and
Can you say that again? What is
tikkun olam?
And that
which is really giving back.
Okay.
Giving back, and so I grew up with a lot of privilege, and my parents always reminded us of that and how it was important to help others. And so that has really sort of infused everything that I do. In addition, growing up gay and being part of a marginalized group also, I think, contributed to that philosophy.
I read you said in an interview, I think back with the Bethesda magazine, that you were always out. Was that ever difficult for you with your family?
Well, I was always out to myself.
Yes.
I wasn't always out to the world. And for example, I don't think I ever thought growing up that I could ever be a mayor. Or the role models that gay people had were, the stereotyped hairdresser or florist or something like that, and I never thought that I could.
Which is fine in itself.
Of course
but
it
didn't
is.
See,
but I didn't see, because usually when you run for office, it's like you have to talk about your family and all that. People are interested in that, and so I never thought, I never thought growing up that I could hold elected office.
Was there a role model in particular that told you that you could hold?
I think the first individuals that got elected, Elaine Noble was the first gay person ever to get elected in this country, and so I think that I got involved as an activist when I was young, and then of course that's at the time when the LGBT movement was first starting, and so I gravitated to that.
Right, and you had a supportive family as well.
Right,
definitely. Which makes an enormous difference, I'm sure.
Very much so. But I think really probably what was the biggest influence on me, like many other people of our generation, was the civil rights movement.
Right.
And watching the demonstrations on television, Dr. King, and following all that.
Right.
I think had a lot to do with it.
So you've had a background or always an interest in civic engagement, I should say. Is that what drove your interest in politics?
Yes, and but in the beginning, I think because I was following the national scene, presidential politics, the civil rights movement on, I really got started in the national arena, and I was on national boards. I was involved with candidates at the federal level, and then finally I came to realize where it's all happening is at the state and local level, and I just sort of gravitated to that over the years.
Oh,
I mean,
interesting.
I lived in the district for a little while. I grew up in Bethesda, moved to the district when I went to law school, and I was active there. And then I came back to Montgomery County 30 years ago, and I got involved in my condominium association, which was just like local government in a lot of ways.
Very much so, yes.
And so it was being active in that arena that sort of made me realize how important and how everything's happening at the local level.
Good. You went to law school. I mean, you were an undergraduate at Tufts, I read, and you went to Georgetown Law School. Did you ever want to practice law?
What I wanted to do originally was to do legal services, legal aid, and but then I got a job at the Labor Department, and then I ended up when I graduated, I ended up working at the D.C. Council. So while I wasn't practicing law in the traditional sense of going to court or having clients, all the positions that I held were jobs that they expect you to have a law degree.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What attracted you to Somerset in particular? When did you move to Somerset?
Well, I moved to Somerset almost 20 years ago, but as I said earlier, I grew up in Bethesda, right next door, and when I was growing up, I took piano lessons in Somerset.
Good for you.
And I think you might
Yes,
remember, right?
yes.
I took piano lessons, and we had friends there, and I always knew what it was. And then I was living, when I moved back to Maryland, I was living in Friendship Heights, which is also a semi-municipality. And then when I moved to Somerset, I was attracted to all the things that we all are: the location, the beauty, the people, and it was right next door. And so
when you joined the council, was it out of wanting to make a difference? Was it in just your interest in politics? What attracted you to the government of Somerset?
Actually, so when I lived in Friendship Heights, I was president of my condominium association for 11 years. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed dealing with the owners and their issues. I enjoyed doing the budget. I enjoyed working with the staff and all that. And I had done that for 11 years, and then I moved to Somerset, and I decided, I'm going to move on, do some other things now.
Yeah.
But then I got recruited. Then people found out that I had that background, and so I got recruited. To run for office. That's what happened.
And we're glad
it wasn't my own. It wasn't because I had, a lot of people run for office because they have a certain opinion of themselves and what they can accomplish. I only ran because people asked me to run because they saw a need in the town for someone with my background, I guess.
And clearly, after being on the council, you saw where there was an opportunity to run for mayor. What did you feel?
Well, again, I was recruited for that too. So I got elected to the council. It was very exciting. And I saw things happening in the town that were sort of not state-of-the-art and not engaging the population in the way that I wanted. There wasn't as much transparency. And there was a longtime leader who was very revered, but I think was sort of a little bit past his prime. And so there were people in town looking for new leadership, and so they asked me to run. And that's really what happened. It wasn't my own need to have the title and all that. It was just because people saw something in me and wanted me to.
I know. I was on the council, as you know. I had the privilege of serving while you were under your mayorship.
And I had the privilege of serving with you.
And I remember when I first got in the council, they said, "Oh, well, you told us to go to." We were the town's a member of the Maryland Municipal League. So we had to go for the 5 days in Ocean City, Maryland.
Right.
And I was thinking, oh, great, 5 days at the beach, I'll take it. Is this what's being on the council? And I have to say, the first time I went to the meeting,
the convention,
I did not even see the beach. once. First of all, we stayed on the cheap side of the hotel, so we didn't have ocean views.
Right.
And then I saw that there was a lot to be learned about governing. And that sounds, I know that sounds naive in some ways, but honestly, when I joined the council, I didn't truly understand. And you must have seen that we didn't understand, and you were very pushy, I must say, about the involvement in the Maryland Municipal League. When did you get involved in the Municipal League?
Well, I think that's because, I think because of all the opportunities. I had been on a board, the Women's Campaign Fund, and part of the mission.
Which is what? What is the Women's Campaign
That's
Fund?
a bipartisan organization that recruits and trains women and helps fund women to run for office.
At a local, state, or national?
Federal, state, and local.
Oh, okay.
And part of the mission of the organization is to train candidates. And so because I'd been on the board, I'd been to some of the training, so I knew that, holding office, there's a lot you need to know, and that's one of the things that the Maryland Municipal League does, and that's what you did at the convention. Went to all those seminars, learning about budgeting, learning about how to run a meeting, learning about how to run specific departments, the parks, etc.
Well, I had never heard of sunshine laws. Honestly, I had never heard of sunshine laws.
Right.
So it was like, whoa, you mean I can't just invite the council over and we're going to discuss an issue?
Right, and ethics and the like. And so I decided that when I was running for mayor, that I wanted to look at this as a team effort. I don't look at the council as rivals. I look at them as all part of the working team. And we all need to have the tools to do our job. And that's why I was very insistent about all of you going to these to the seminars at the convention.
Had the council been president, had they been active with the Maryland Municipal League prior to your being a mayor, bringing the mayor?
Yes, there had been a certain level of activity.
There had been.
But I encouraged greater activity, everybody to participate, and there's also a designation that you can get, a certificate that you've taken. And so I was sort of like a school principal in that way. Yeah. Because I think it's important, and I take great pride in the fact that our council, every council member has sort of their own portfolio that they work on and take leadership in and are knowledgeable about, and they're all active members. When I first got on the council, I didn't see that. When I was a member of the council, no. So I sat there and listened for 6 years and saw what was going on. And then when I got asked to run for that office, I decided to implement my
So that
ideas.
was one of the changes you made as mayor. What do you think some of the other changes that you have made as mayor?
Well, one, involving my philanthropy, I think it was really important to me. There's so many wonderful people in the town, and a lot of times when Somerset is talked about in the media, they talk about our nice houses and really more it's the content of the residents' character than what's in their houses that's important. And so, to me, I'm trying to get everyone to be a philanthropist in the town, and to get engaged in advocacy or in social services, and that's why I helped establish Community Service Day, for example, in the town, and the like.
Do you encourage philanthropy locally? Is that something you particularly have?
Yes.
You must. I mean.
Yes, I do, and I'm trying to open everyone in town, and particularly the council's eyes, to the fact of how much need there is in our county and in our own backyard, even in Bethesda Chevy Chase. I think there's had been a tendency for a lot of people in our particular area, Somerset environments, to look only for people in need and poverty in the city east of the river. Well, Montgomery County has just as much poverty as the District of Columbia now. So I've been trying to orient to that.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why, for example, Community Service Day, we do things for groups in Montgomery County. And even in our backyard, there are homeless people. We help homeless people in our own neighborhood. There are
Right.
even homeless people in Somerset.
Right. No,
area. Yeah,
yes,
as you
in
know.
in our area. Hold that thought. I want to come back to it. This is Somerset Stories, and our guest is Mayor Jeffery Slavin, and we're going to take a quick break.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Welcome back to Somerset Stories. I'm Kathy Pickar, your host, and our guest today is the Mayor of Somerset, Jeffery Slavin. Jeffery, you've been talking a bit about yourself and your interesting background. I want to talk a little bit more now about Somerset and its history. But first of all, what do you see is unique about Somerset within other municipalities in Montgomery County?
Well, one thing unique about us structurally is the fact that our mayor, I'm elected directly by the people.
Right.
And in the neighboring towns, the mayor is elected by the councils, for example, in the town of Chevy Chase, and they rotate it around. And I think because of that, and then they rotate on and off. So you're not necessarily mayor for more than a term, a year or something.
Oh, really?
So they don't really get a lot of identity. Because the way it's structured, that I'm elected by the people, and then I am the mayor, and then for some reason that attracts more attention by outsiders, giving it more. So for example. When I get involved in things and get involved in issues, remember there was the issue of that chemical that was being used at nearby
Right.
Chevy Chase Country Club.
Correct.
That was wafting over into our town, and people were all upset about it. So because for some reason this title has been established in the media, and also I think because of the 40-year duration of the former mayor's term, a certain status got attached to it, because when the former mayor passed away a couple of years ago, his obituary was on the front page of the Metro section.
Right.
So
Yes.
and I can't really explain why that's happened, but for some reason this has a certain amount of status to it, and I've tried to use that status to improve the quality of life of our residents through the media. So I think, for example, the issue of the chemicals being used by the Chevy Chase Country Club to make sure that their golf course had a better grass. So some of our residents heard about it and were concerned that of the effects on their health. So and the way we didn't really necessarily have legal authority over the country club. They're not even in our town, but we do have the ability to affect the court of public opinion. And so because I have a title that's pretty well known now, thanks to the former mayor and what I've tried to do. So I went on television and talked about it, and eventually the country club was concerned about his reputation, so they backed down. And it wasn't even through any kind of regulation.
No, it's my understanding that resolved very nicely.
So while some people, sometimes I've been criticized for being a publicity hound, but it's if that's the case, it's only because I was trying to help my residents and not for me.
Yeah. There are different types of municipal governments, and I remember this is such a terrible name. One of them was weak mayor, strong council. How do you describe the government?
In some of these governments, for example, in Rockville and in Tacoma Park, the mayor is a member of the council. So and they vote, and so it's a totally different dynamic. And one of the things that I wanted to do as mayor was to really empower the council in terms of its functions, setting policy, passing laws, and overseeing the work of the mayor and the administration.
So
you know,
you're
the staff.
non-voting. You're not a member of the council. When do you
I
vote?
only vote. I only, per the charter, I only vote when there's a tie. There's hardly ever. I think there's. I don't think there. I think maybe once there's been a tie in 9 years.
Right.
And because I have really encouraged issues to be worked out before they come to the council through our committees and with the staff working on things, almost all of our votes now are unanimous. But that's not because there weren't differences of opinion. That's because I want people to resolve issues before they're actually voted on.
And I noticed that with the budget. You present the budget, the way the government works, and then the council votes, which is a typical government way to proceed. But there are several hearings and work sessions that are open
well, that's
and very transparent. And when it comes to the budget, it seems, in my experience when I'm reading about it now, not an active member, that it has been worked out, which is very nice.
Well, that's an example of how, because of my experience, I worked in government. I worked at the D.C. Council years ago, and then also running the Condominium Association. I knew how important budgets are. People don't realize that really the budget is the most important thing that all these governments work on. And when I was on the council in Somerset, the budget, there wasn't transparency, there wasn't information. It was sort of shoved in our faces and vote on it yes or no. Now I've implemented this elaborate process that engages the residents and most particularly the council in every line of the budget. So under the code and the charter, the mayor introduces the budget, and then it's disclosed to the public, and then there's hearings and vote on it. But I changed that so that even before I introduce the budget, I've worked with the council through work sessions to go over line by line, so we come to agreement on the numbers even before it's introduced.
Right, which is nice. And I think part of the difficulty in governing a small town is that you're governing your neighbors, you're governing your friends.
Right.
And that, as a council member, I found that could be difficult. So to help to that end, I find that the community or the committees made up by residents, non-elected, working with the council is very helpful to preserve just the community feel. You don't want a small town to go through divisive issues, if at all possible.
No question about it.
Yeah.
No question about it. And I think that having lots of process, public hearings, lots of involvement, citizens on committees, working on issues before they're actually decided upon. Usually all the issues can be discussed and compromise can be arrived at, and then you move forward and make a decision.
Right. I always kind of chuckle because one issue that the residents and so many people these days in many communities are concerned with is development and development around you. And Somerset has a fairly large percentage of parkland, which does protect us a lot from development. But going back to when Somerset was founded, in what was it? I mean, you mentioned charter.
Right.
The founders, a lot of people don't realize this, were 5 scientists from the government, from the Department of Agriculture. And one of them's last name was Salmon. And he is the one who discovered what is now salmonella when they were doing animal studies. So what did these guys do? I'm sure whether they had a patent, I don't know exactly how it worked. I mean, it was government property, but I'm sure they all of a sudden saw themselves a little bit more as entrepreneurs, and they became developers. And they go out. There were several 100-acre farms, about 12 up and down our area. And they bought property in one and subdivided and started building. So they were early speculators and developers. And you fast forward 120 years or whatever it is, and here we are, again, looking at developers, as I have a feeling that some of the farmers were, over 100 years ago, like, what's happening here? So that's an interesting story in itself.
Right, and that's sort of ironic given the fact that one of the big accomplishments of a lot of our town and other towns surrounding us is fighting development. And historically, especially in Friendship Heights, through the process through many years, when developers wanted to target Friendship Heights area, which includes Somerset, to sort of Manhattanize it. This was in the 70s and 80s. The citizens basically revolted, and through all the processes of the planning board and the county councils, I think that Somerset looks, and the surrounding area looks very different than it would have if citizens hadn't been involved. It's the same with those scientists that you mentioned that were developers. The reason why Somerset came to be is because before there was a town, the region where all those farms were governed by the state of Maryland, and so services that were provided.
Was it the county or the state?
It was the state.
It was.
It was the state at the time, right? And this is 1906. And they weren't satisfied with the services, and it's all in a book. There's a book which I think you've read, and so they applied to the state of Maryland for a charter, and that's why we call our Constitution our charter, and that allowed us to incorporate as the same way you would form a corporation.
Well, and they did it because they needed money. They needed to be able to tax.
They needed to be able to tax.
There is
That's
a lovely
right.
little book that
That's
was
right.
written by two Somerset residents, Leslie Simmons, who was on the council
Right.
and no longer lives in Somerset,
Right.
but Donna Harmon,
Right.
who grew up,
in Somerset,
I think,
right.
in Somerset, didn't
That's
she?
right. That's
and
right.
it's a wonderful little book. I encourage people to look at it or to read it.
Right.
But I had to chuckle because what was happening, the developers didn't have enough money to do the roads because certain
Right.
people weren't paying their share
Right.
of the common.
That's right.
And so they went to the state
That's right.
in 1905, and then they were granted. I have a feeling today the state would not grant
No,
charters quite
no,
so
I don't
freely.
think so. And now actually it's changed somewhat because it's the county that has to be involved, because there have been attempts in our county. Rollingwood tried to become a full municipality. Friendship Heights, which actually is a special tax district status, they tried to become a municipality, and that was all turned down. But I'm glad you brought up the roads, because one of the most important things that we do in the town is maintain our roads, not only the potholes, but also the snow removal and the cleaning of the roads. And yes, the funds that our forefathers and foremothers couldn't get, that we have access to, or because we are a municipality, and we get, according to the Maryland Constitution, when a Somerset resident pays $1 in Maryland taxes, the town gets 17 cents back.
Right.
And then we also have the ability to if there's a gap between what those revenues are, then we also can enact a property tax.
Well, the history of Somerset is something we could devote several shows to.
Oh, definitely.
And I hope we do. But I want to thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you.
This is Somerset Stories. I'm Kathy Pickar, your host, and I hope you'll join us again. Thank you.